What up everybody? It's Dylan with Magickal Cams. Today, I'm making a video about drainage. Now you might be asking or thinking, hey Dylan, what the heck's drainage? Well, simply, it's just a way that we get all that extra water out of our chameleons' cages. Now, the water that I'm talking about is from mistings, so the chameleon drinks and we can raise humidity in our cages. Yeah, we go through a lot of water. So, we need somewhere for it to go. That's outside the chameleon's cage. If we keep that water inside the chameleon's cage, even if it's just a little puddle in the bottom, it creates a nice place for bacteria to grow and reproduce. And it's actually really bad for our chameleons. In the wild, they don't typically have that kind of environment that they're exposed to, or that at least they can move away from it. Now, do you realize that in Madagascar it's pretty humid, and we're trying to achieve high humidity by using water? So, that being said, a lot of people like myself use a mist system, an automatic mist system, or if you don't use a misting system, you're probably using some sort of like hand mister with a pump or maybe just a spray bottle. Either way, you might have a small pool of water in the bottom. Now, in this video, I'm going to go over a couple methods on how to get rid of that water with a drain. The first method I'm going to go over is the one that I use myself. This method, in my opinion, is the most effective with getting all the water out and not having any spills, not getting water on your floor, etc. So just to kind of put it in a nutshell, what I do is I go ahead and get some cinder blocks from like Home Depot or Lowe's, and these things cost about $1. And I'll use these around the four corners of the cage to create a riser. And essentially you could use wood as a riser. You can use any sort of, solid object that's going to support the weight of the cage and not allow the cage to fall during an earthquake, because it's not, it doesn't support it properly. So from there, I take out this guy. This is the bottom of the cage. And after I do that, what I do is I go to the store and get corrugated plastic, which is essentially like a plastic cardboard. A lot of times you'll see this used as like a sign that says like vote for mayor such and such, or things like that. If you haven't seen this, or you think you haven't seen it, you probably have. It's a tough plastic. And essentially what I do with it is I make the cage floor out of this. I get a big sheet of it, I put the floor that came with the cage on it, trace that, cut it, and then I have a new floor. From there, what I'll do is I'll get one of these guys. This is, I believe, an ABS drain. It's like PVC. And essentially what I do is I'll use a utility blade like this to cut a hole in the center. It doesn't have to be perfect. I just find the center the best I can, and then cut a hole out and hot glue it in. And I'm very liberal with the hot glue. Now you can use super glue, but do realize that's going to be permanent. So if you ever want to, put a different bottom in or reuse the drain for something else, using super glue will hinder you from doing that. So from there, once I have that new bottom in, I either put it in a bowl, or, if I want to attach a couple chameleon cages together, I'll go ahead and use PVC. So I'm going to go into a little bit more in depth of an explanation and give you a visual of exactly what I'm talking about. So, the first thing you want to do is go get corrugated plastic and cut it to the size of the bottom. The easiest way to do that is just to get the old bottom and trace, and then on the corrugated plastic, and then cut it. So once you have that, you get your little black drain, you cut a hole for it, and glue it in. Put the new bottom in the cage with the drain
And then you should have something that looks like this without the white attachment on it. So from there, you can just go ahead and put a bowl and call it a day. And then you can see that my plants on the bottom are allowing this corrugated plastic to kind of bend inward a little bit. And that allows the water to kind of centralize to that drain and then drain down into the bucket. So say you want to connect multiple chameleon cages together, at which point you would go get PVC and again, just go in the store and play around with it. So what this first piece is that's attached to the drain is one of these. I have no idea what this is called. I just know it fits on the drain, and then I could put like a threaded piece right here that has an attachment for the PVC on the other end. So once you get that in place, then you get your threaded piece, which is this guy. Screw this in with some Teflon tape so there's no leaks, and then start attaching your PVC and use PVC cement to connect all these pieces together in order for no water to leak out. And yes, water will leak out because these PVC fittings aren't super tight, just setting them inside each other. So you want to go ahead and make sure to do that unless you want water all over your floor. So you can see Sage's cage has the same setup, comes down, over, and then that goes down to a drainage bucket, which I will go ahead and empty once it's full.
Okay, so now you've seen that first method. The next method that I use is creating like a wood stand for the cage. I got some extra wood laying around. They're pretty wide pieces of wood. I mean, you can get creative with whatever wood you want to use. And I essentially created like a frame. And then inside that frame, I put like a ledge with a smaller, I believe it was a 2x2. And then drilled that all together, set the cage in there, and attach the drain the same way that I did with the first method. I'll go ahead and show you that stand right now.
So the other example I was talking about, you know, other than putting your cage on risers, which in this case is little bricks, I went ahead and built I had some extra wood laying around. I built a square frame with some large pieces of wood. And then once I had the square made, I went ahead and put, I think they were 2x2s, the square pieces of wood that are long. Again, I'm sorry, I don't know technical terms. And then I just drilled that into this. And this is about maybe like a 1.5 inches down or so, maybe a little less. That way the cage just sits inside there. If you have any questions about how to do that part, I will happily answer them. But anyway, so I set this 2x2x4 cage on top of the stand that I made. And then I went ahead and used the same idea as this. And let's move some of this stuff out of the way. So then I attached that to the cage. Sorry, it's a bit dark. And then just let that down to here. And again, using PVC cement, so all that water along the way doesn't drip out. And then another thing I want to mention is this part is a little curved, so that way gravity will pull the water towards the bucket. You know, you want to make sure that it's not the opposite direction, or else the water is going to sit at the corner over here. So yeah, just make this shaft right here that comes down from the cage a little shorter, and yeah, and you're in business.
Okay, so there's the first two ways to raise your cage, and maybe you're liking it, maybe it seems a little too involved. You know, maybe it's not quite what you want. We'll get to some other ideas in just a second. But first, I'm going to go over another idea that I've used. This idea involves getting more corrugated plastic. So essentially, why I did this was I had a cage that I had refurbished and put back together and wasn't quite level. So just sitting there, the water, even if it was on risers, the water would spill out one side. So I used the same corrugated plastic, and I made like a little tray for it. That's a little bigger than the footprint of the cage. And that was just simply getting the corrugated plastic square cut for the bottom, and then putting on sides and sticking it all together with hot glue. And I'm talking about using a good amount of hot glue to really seal this gap so water doesn't get out. And then from there, I put in my drain and then attached my PVC to the bottom, put the cage on top and put bricks under it. So that essentially created the same idea. It just got all the water that ran off the side of the cage. So another idea you can use if you don't want to get too DIY with it is that there's this brand called Strand that makes a wonderful product called a heavy duty drainage tray. And essentially what that is it's a tray that sits on the bottom of your cage and collects all the water, and it makes it really easy for you to siphon it out, so on and so forth, and it looks really clean. It looks really nice. So I've actually used one of those and I like it. However, I don't like having to siphon the water out and having that water just pool in the bottom underneath the cage. So what I actually did was I took one of these and I cut the ribbed end off. And that's the smaller end. And then I made sure that was cut to the thickness of the drainage tray material. And then I glued that to the bottom. And then from there, I went ahead and attached my PVC, so on and so forth. And I'll go ahead and show you how I did that right now.
So then this is the last idea I was talking about, or one of the last ones that doesn't involve any, like hardly any drilling and cutting of furniture and all that. So what this is this is a Dragon Strand heavy duty drainage tray. And sitting on it is a 2x2x4 cage. So essentially what this does is this collects water. Let's see, you can see the water in here. So it's very minimal. It's maybe like 1/8 of an inch. So if we open this, I'll show you what I'm talking about, how I did this and everything. So this one happened to come with a screen. So I went ahead and put that here instead of the PVC floor. And this way it has max drainage, water, gets out of the cage from every point on the bottom. Of course, you could just essentially get your bottom that came with the cage and just drill a bunch of holes in it, or drill some holes in the center. So then I have that going to, let's see if we can see it without having to dismantle the cage. Yeah, so in the back, like right here, I have a little hose barb drain thing. I'll show you a picture of it. Let's get this back together. All right. So I ended up cutting that piece to be the thickness of this PVC material. And then I went ahead and glued it here. Let's see if you can see it. I'll put a picture next to it since it's so dark. And then from there, I went ahead and attached the PVC the same way. This one end is threaded to fit onto the black piece, and then this piece is like the other one where you just put your PVC inside, call it a day.
Okay, so in that video, you saw that I had a screen in the bottom. Some of you might like that for max drainage. Some of you might just be cool with drilling holes in the bottom of your cage floor. Another idea that you can use is to get some of this stuff. And essentially what this is I believe it's called like plastic egg crate. It's for ceiling lights. It goes in the ceiling, and I don't know its purpose. I would imagine something useful. But yeah, essentially it's just plastic, and then you would just get some like wire cutters, and cut this to the size of the bottom of your cage, and then that will take the place of that screen. But just be aware that feeders will get through this. So I don't know if that's the best method for you. Yeah, just ideas to consider. This whole thing's about creativity. You know, no cages are, are typically designed to have drainage. So this is where we gotta come in and, think outside the box. Okay, so some other ideas. You like the ideas I've given. I've shown you a product that Dragon Strand makes. So what are some other ideas? Another idea that I've seen people do is get a utility sink from the hardware store. And that's the same size as the footprint of your cage. And then they take the cage and set it on top of this utility sink and mount it to that, I believe with like zip ties, which would involve you drilling holes in the side of the sink and then zip tying the cage down. And that way they can just put plants in there, and then all the water from the cage goes in the sink, and then they have the sink drain into a bowl or a bucket, and that works. It just doesn't look that nice. So then I've seen some other people take a piece of furniture, like for example, a nightstand. And what they'll do is they'll put their cage on it and mark on the stand where they are gonna have their drain, drill holes in the bottom of the little mat on the bottom of the cage, and then from there drill a hole in the piece of furniture, and then from there they either add a pipe or just allow the water to drain into a bowl, and that looks good. However, it's not very forgiving. The stuff I've shown you is forgiving and there's ways to fix it, but if you want to go with the method of actually drilling a hole into a piece of furniture, you can't really put that piece of furniture back together. And that just also seems a little involved. And, I think that you should just go with a rack, like in the videos I had. It's nice because the 1/2-inch PVC fits in it, and it's great because you can essentially use it for something else if you ever decide to put your chameleon on something else, on a different stand. So, other than that, there's plenty of ways you can get creative with drainage and all that kind of stuff. So, go to the hardware store and just look at the stuff. Sometimes I get lost in the hardware store doing this kind of stuff. So just make sure you have some free time on your hands. Go mess with the PVC, go mess with the drains, see what you like. Just beware though that a lot of drains will have a thick lip, which will be sitting on top of whatever your floor is. And if that's the case, then you're gonna have water pool up. Another reason I like the one that I showed you before was that it had a small lip on top, so a lot of the water wasn't standing in the bottom of the cage. So if you want to pick my brain and maybe ask for some ideas, maybe talk about maybe collaborating with your ideas with my ideas, whatever, just go ahead and reach out, send me a message, ask some questions, and I'd be happy to help you figure out some drainage for your chameleon. Anyway, go ahead and reach out with those questions, or if you just want to talk to Magickal Cams, and you can reach us at Facebook right here, facebook.com/magicalcams, and then on Instagram it's going to be at magicalcams, and then email is going to be magicalcams@gmail.com, and then go ahead and subscribe. I think that's it. Yeah, have a good one.